So hi, I'm Rachel and I'm a compulsive overeater. And I think I always have been. And when I looked at step 2 and it said, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. For me, it wasn't restore me to sanity, it was give me sanity, because I cannot remember a time when I was sane around food. For me, this disease started really, really young. And if there's a gene for it, it's in my family, because I was surrounded by compulsive overeaters. My father and grandmother were my binge buddies, and then fairly soon in my journey, my dieting buddies as well. Um, and my earliest memory actually is of being told off because I was fat. Actually, I wasn't fat at that stage. I didn't really start gaining weight to be a podgy kid until I was about 6 or 7. But even before then, it was an issue. It was, and my body was the topic of conversation. Um, and being fat was, it seemed, was our fate, but it was also the most terrible thing to be. And along with that, the overeating, there was also a lot of addiction in my family. My family is very loving, but it is pretty chaotic and dysfunctional. People were quite distracted, and there was a lot going on. And I grew up, I think, bewildered. It was kind of my most common emotion. I just did not get life. Um, I've was I've been blessed with being academically pretty brainy, but emotionally, absolutely nowhere. I absolutely did not get life, and my kind of constant question was, okay, if I'm supposed to be so clever, how come I don't know how to do really simple, straightforward, ordinary things like know how to sleep, know how to eat, know how to make friends? I was just like, and I really felt that I was the only one who had been born without the rule book. Coming into recovery, I've now discovered that actually this is, I've heard this shared by many fellows, and I would say that I now feel I now have an entire library of the rule book for how to live. Lots and lots of recovery literature I found outside of OA as well, and that realization that actually I am just a bozo on the bus. Um, I have a number of assets. I have a good number of character defects. That's okay. I can live with that. But that's part of the transformation for me, was just that acceptance of myself. Because when I grew up, actually, the way I interpret it was, I am utterly, completely worthless. I am the biggest mess that ever lived. I mean, so I've heard the phrase, "the piece of poo the world spins around." That so describes how I was. And I didn't recognize that that was a massive ego. Um, and that I used to sort of think of myself, in the same categories, all sorts of these hateful figures. In hell there would be me and various others. I won't know because they're outside issues. Um, so that excoriating sense of self-hate was what drove me a lot of the time, and it drove me to hide. It drove me to hide in food, and my eating pattern was one of the kind of extreme kinds. I had massive binges. I would do things like order, when I got older and able to do it, I would order takeaway meals for 4 people. Somehow kid myself that I was going to, that this was somehow economically okay, because I was going to eat it over several days, and of course polish it off that same night. Um, if I would get them delivered, I was one of the first to be able to work out how to get deliveries done quite a long time ago, pretending that there were other people in the house. It was absolute craziness. There's a part at the beginning of our OA 12 and 12 where it talks about, I think it's at the beginning of step 2, where it lists all the different behaviors that we've done as overeaters. And honestly, it's like tick, 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 tick. I have eaten food off the floor. I've eaten food that was frozen because I couldn't wait for it to defrost. I've burned my mouth eating things that were too hot because I couldn't wait for them to cool down. I've damaged myself with eating foods that were just so unhealthy for me. Well, some for everybody, some for me. Just didn't stop, and it never occurred to me that that was the problem. My problem was always my weight, and my fat, and my lack of willpower. Actually, food was my best friend. In fact, I've heard it said it was my best friend and worst enemy. Um, and I've actually come to the place where one of the promises is we don't regret the past nor wish to shut the door in it. Actually, in a way, I don't regret it because it was my way of coping with sometimes some very extreme situations, and certainly with my extreme lack of capacity to be
10
able to.
minutes left.
Thanks, Diana. With my absolute lack of capacity to be able to do anything about it. The other side of my story is also the extreme dieting, and I'm a terrific drama queen. And one of the things that I loved, and it's only become clear to me over the years because dieting was one of the things that actually I stopped doing comparatively early on. But I would go on extreme diets, and I was never ever able to diet sensibly. Whatever the diet was, even if it was really sensible in principle and theory, I would find a way to do it really stupidly. I was doing the 5-2 diet long before it was fashionable, only I did 5 days starving, 2 days binging. So could not do it. And I absolutely loved and was pretty addicted to the drama of losing a load of weight really, really rapidly. And I would get such applause and acclaim for that. My family loved it. Friends and families like, look what you've done. You know, you're wonderful. You've lost half your body weight in a really short space of time. And I loved that feeling. I loved the attention I got, particularly as I grew older, for losing half my body weight, even though I've done all sorts of other things in my life. That was the thing I have always received the most attention for. And I've worked through that on the step with the steps and can now accept that that's how it was, and often how it is as well. And you know, I can accept I don't like it, and I have to like it, but I can accept that that's how life is. So this continued. On the surface, it looked as if my life was absolutely fine. I mean, apart from the fact that my weight would swing like 9 stone. I'm not sure what that is in kilos and pounds, on a regular basis. But apart from that, my life looked absolutely fine. I got to a good university. I got married. I got a job, got a cat. But inside, I was crumbling more and more. And it felt more and more as if I was retreating and there was this kind of robot that was acting. And of course, that started to fall apart. And my marriage fell apart. And I came out as a lesbian. And I thought, okay, right, that's it. That is the answer. That's what I've been eating on all these years, because part of me desperately wanted to be normal, and normal for me meant being straight, it meant being thin. And I was sometimes the latter and never the former, as it turned out. So I came out, and that was great. And I met a woman that I really liked, and always going to be sweetness and light. And actually, to be fair, it did answer a lot of queries about myself, but it absolutely didn't stop me eating. I got into therapy. That absolutely, again, helped me to understand a lot of what was going on, but didn't stop me eating. In fact, I used to go into therapy sessions and I had this ritual binge afterwards because I couldn't cope with the feelings that were coming up. So I wasn't really able to take proper advantage of that kind of outside help. Anyway, so I met this woman, realized that I really liked her, and we started to go out. And a little while later, she told me that our relationship was unsustainable because I was not emotionally available. And it turned out that she was in another fellowship. And as part of her recovery, she was frankly not going to put up with my not being able to be in relationship. And on February the 13th, that will have been 30 years ago, and we are still together. And we yesterday went out for an abstinent meal to plan a party in a restaurant, and so that worked. And I've heard it said that people come in for the vanity, stay for the sanity. I came in to keep a relationship, because I recognized there was something there. There was something about this person, and it took her a while, a few months, to get me into the room. Well, she did. She 12-stepped me into the rooms because I wanted to keep that relationship. And actually, you know what? I did not obey tradition 3, that says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop eating compulsively. I didn't want to stop eating compulsively. I wanted to carry right on eating exactly as I had been and miraculously lose weight. I also wanted to keep this relationship. That was my motivation for coming in. And I was very, very quickly came to realize that that wasn't the point of recovery at all. And I started really to realize quite how much food had been damaging me. As much as it had protected me when I was a child, actually now it was so getting in the way, absolutely getting in the way of me, between me and people. And I started to realize, but very, very, very slowly, it was also getting in the way of between me and a higher power. And I really wanted to talk a little bit about, because for me, recovery has absolutely been about that search for a power greater than myself that can give me.
5 minutes left.
Thank you, Diana. And that's been central. It took me a really long time to realize that. And I wish I could sort of say, oh, I came in, 20, nearly 30 years ago, and I got abstinent straight away and job done. Not at all. My story has been absolutely one of relapse and recovery, relapse and recovery. I have now got an abstinence. It's of around something over 3 years. I've never actually in that time gone back to those massive, massive, massive binges or those massive, massive diets. So, when last time I had a relapse, it was a few snacks that lasted over a few days. And that's not to say that that was okay, but it is to say that actually I can see progress even over all those years. But actually, every time I relapsed, it was because I did not have a strong enough connection to a higher power. And I really, they just talk about it sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes slowly. And that's all right, because I can really accept my journey. And I used, when I was doing chats, to think, oh my God, I can't admit to having relapse. But now I can really see that maybe my experience can benefit others. And I know when I hear others sharing a similar story, that gives me that hope. People say that it was the gift of desperation that gets you into it. Actually, what I found has kept me here is not the desperation, it's the hope that I found. And I have found that hope on my very first meeting, hearing people sharing about lives and feelings, and particularly feelings and ways of being that was so like mine and I'd never heard before. And it's like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one. And for me, the search for a higher power, what I really wanted was to see a burning bush, to get a religion, and that would be that. I grew up in a family that was incredibly scornful of religion. The watchword for my father was, religion is the opiate of the masses. So I find it really hard now. But I really wanted that experience. I didn't get it, actually. I really didn't. And, that is the truth for some people. It wasn't the truth for me. For me, it's been much more of an unfolding. I can't define my higher power. It's more like there's something greater than myself is the water that I now swim in. And it's about connection and about, I hear that wisdom. Basically it's outside of myself. It's when I can connect with somebody else and something else, somehow that kind of works. And that's about the best I can manage to do it. And I did want to say something about, well, how do I keep that connection? Because part of my disease is absolute amnesia. I seem to forget that I'm a compulsive eater as soon as I shut my eyes and go to sleep. So this really is a daily reprieve. For me, permanence is absolutely about repetition. And what has kept me in the rooms and kept me abstinence is actually really simply using the tools. It means, so I say prayers. I have a morning routine where I say some prayers. Personally, I quite like to have some formal ritual ones. That there's something about that ritual that I just find really comforting. Again, this is how I do it. I truly believe there are as many different forms of a higher power as there are people in the rooms, and there's probably as many different ways of working the steps as there are people in the rooms. But this is, treat this as an example, if you like. And I have a food plan. For me, it's really important to plan my food every day because I can go off on one extremely easily. I don't always stick exactly to what I've said, because if I start becoming rigid, then I start going into that dieting mode very, very quickly. But I've got an overall framework, and for me, there's a bottom line. For me, it's 3 meals a day, a snack if I'm really hungry, and nothing in between.
1 minute left.
Thank you. And also excluding my binge foods. And oh my God, that's gone really quickly. And I would say that actually, do you know what? I now have food neutrality, certainly around my red foods. They just don't seem like food anymore. And I couldn't have done that without a connection to a higher power. And I couldn't have done that without all of you guys who, as it were, help me to create the safety net. And I like to think that maybe I can be a bit of a part of other people's safety net as well. And I will leave it there. Thank you very much.